on behalf of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, I'm just so pleased to be here. And this panel is kicking off the symposium, as you know, and it's focused on, I think, one of the bright spots in the last 5 years for clean energy industries. It's jobs and economic development. So we have an excellent panel here with you, and we want to make sure we have time for questions at the end. So think about questions as we're going through the discussion. What I'd like to do is introduce the panelists and then just say a few words about the Business Council for Sustainable Energy's orientation on the industry and job creation in clean energy sectors. And then we're going to allow each one of the panelists a few minutes to introduce themselves in more detail, and then maybe share one or two of their reflections related to clean energy jobs, and then we'll have a moderated discussion. So with that, let me first introduce the panelists. We have Bob Keefe, Executive Director of Environmental Entrepreneurs, right to my left. And next we have Maggie Lemmerman, Senior Director of Federal Affairs for the American Wind Energy Association. Next, we have Brian Just, Senior Economist at the American Petroleum Institute, and then Emily Duncan, Director of Federal Affairs for National Grid. So what we're going to hear is a very broad set of perspectives from a number of the leading industries in clean energy sectors, as well as a company that's very diversified and works in all of these areas. So we're very lucky. So the Business Council for Sustainable Energy is a trade association. We were founded in the early 1990s, all about promoting the opportunities for clean energy to help support environmental challenges, economic challenges, and a host of energy concerns. What we've seen since the council was founded was a remarkable transformation, and in just looking at the last decade, we've seen a number of key trend lines that are significant. One, our energy productivity as a country has dramatically increased. Our GDP has grown in the last decade over 15%, but energy use has remained low and declined slightly, about 2%. We've seen renewable energy dramatically increase from about 9% of our power sector mix to nearly 20, almost on par with our nuclear fleet. So when you look at renewable energy comprehensively, it's a major contributor. Energy efficiency is in all facets of our economy. We've seen dramatic increases in utility spend on both natural gas and electric utility energy efficiency programs, tremendous building sector improvements with energy efficiency, and natural gas. Now natural gas nearly makes up with renewables over half of our generation mix. So we had a dramatic increase in natural gas generation, and that's just the power sector. Looking at transportation, we all know we're also seeing dramatic changes, and we have cleaner fleets, and we're taking advantage of many new technologies, whether they be related to natural gas or electric vehicles or fuel cells, or things like start-stop that you don't even notice, but are providing significant energy efficiency gains. So it's a really amazing story. And a key component of that is, what is this doing to the U.S. economy? And are we spreading these benefits along in a complementary way to job creation? So that's what this panel is going to talk mostly about. It's going to be the job story. As we've seen tremendous investment and growth in these industries, what's happening with employment and where is it happening? And, what can we do to expand and accelerate those opportunities? So to get us started, again, I'm going to let each one of the panelists just share a few thoughts at a high level about how they see clean energy jobs, and then we'll have a discussion. So, Bob, we're going to start with you.
All right. Thank you. And I'll tell you my first thought. I woke up this morning thinking, how can I be as energized as Andy Karsner was last night? Because I don't know about you guys, but I thought he was great. And and then I realized, everybody was drinking last night and everybody's hungover this morning, so I'm not even going to attempt to do that. But thank you all for being here, and I appreciate you getting up early to be with us this morning. As mentioned, my name is Bob Keefe. I'm the Executive Director of E2, Environmental Entrepreneurs. And if you don't know us, E2 is a national, nonpartisan group of business owners, investors, other professionals who care about the economy, care about the environment. We've got about 5,000 members and supporters spread across 9 chapters, stretching from New York and New England down to LA and San Diego. And I like to say our members range from the chairman of Google to mom and pop solar installers in the middle of Iowa to energy efficiency guys in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the one thing they have in common is they know that the economy and the environment aren't at odds, but in fact depend on each other. So over the past 4 or 5 years, E2 has tried to tell the story about the economic importance of clean energy in this country, and we've done it by taking a real close look at clean energy jobs. And earlier this year, we teamed up, E2 and some other partners, including some in this room, teamed up with NASIO, the National Association of State Energy Officers, and EFI, Energy Futures Initiative, a group run by former DOE Secretary Ernie Moniz, to essentially resurrect something called the U.S. Energy Employment Report. Now, this was a study that was done by the Department of Energy for about 2 years. DOE dropped it a year ago, but we decided, you know what, this is important stuff. We need to keep it going. So over the summer, we released the updated 2018 version of the user report, which tracks all energy jobs across all sectors in every state in America. And what E2 did was we pulled the clean stuff out. And we wanted to really look at what was becoming the fastest, and is now the fastest growing part of the energy market. And what we found is this. Well, let me ask you a question first. How many people actually are in clean energy in this room? All right. How many, well, that's not too many. How about, how many in renewables? Energy efficiency. All right, there you go. Well, that's pretty indicative, actually. So I'm going to give you the view outside the Beltway. Right now, there are about 3.2 million Americans that work in clean energy in every state in the country. Of that 3.2 million, about 2.25 million are in energy efficiency, folks like the ones that raised their hands here, and it was actually a kind of an indicative disproportionate amount, if you will. Another 500,000 work in solar and wind. About 220,000 work in clean vehicles, the types of jobs that Lisa was talking about that are making our cars more fuel efficient. They're making our Teslas and our Chevy Volts and Bolts and the parts that go in those to make them go a little further on a gallon of gas. And then there are other clean energy sectors that employ about 250,000 people, 250,000 jobs also. And those are areas like energy storage and smart grid and biofuels, low impact hydro, geothermal, those type of things. So the thing that's significant though at 3.2 million jobs, that's a lot of jobs. In fact, that's more than there are people that work in investment banking in this country. It's more than people work in real estate in this country, believe it or not. It's as many people as teach school in America right now. This is a huge and growing sector, and I think we're going to get a little bit more into the trends and policies a little bit later, so I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Maggie.
Great, thanks Lisa, and it's great to be here this morning. As Lisa mentioned earlier, I'm with the American Wind Energy Association. So we are the trade group for the U.S. wind sector. And we represent about 1,000 member companies who are doing business here in the U.S. in wind. And it's a very diverse group of companies. So we represent everyone from the manufacturers who are building all of the component parts that go into a wind project, to the project developers, the construction companies out there building wind farms, the owner-operators, the wind techs, the utilities who are purchasing the power from a wind farm, and increasingly corporate purchasers, so companies like Microsoft or GM who are interested in purchasing power directly from a renewable project. So it's a diverse group of jobs that we represent. And I think that the wind energy industry is really representative of the outpaced growth that Bob was talking about that we've seen across the board in the clean energy sector. So in wind right now, we have 106,000 direct jobs in the economy, and that's grown dramatically over the last few years. So just in 2014, we only had 50,000 jobs in wind. So we've seen a tremendous amount of growth just over the last few years, which has been really exciting. for our industry. And we expect that to continue to grow. There was a recent Navigant consulting study that showed about 40,000 additional direct jobs in wind coming online by 2020. So we're going to continue to see that momentum and growth in the wind industry over the next few years. And as we look out a little further, particularly with the offshore wind sector really gaining a lot of momentum and steam right now, we expect going into the next decade a lot of opportunity and jobs in the offshore wind sector as well. I think one little factoid that really sums up this growth and this continued momentum is last year, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the fastest growing job in the U.S. was the wind turbine technician. So those are the guys that are climbing up the wind tower and servicing and maintaining the turbine. They were the #1 fastest growing job in the economy. Now this year we dropped to #2, only to be replaced by the solar panel installer. It's now the #1 job in America. And we have a healthy competition with solar, and that was exciting for to see. Well, we expect to be back up to #1 again soon. But it just goes to show you in this economy, clean energy jobs are the #1 and #2 fastest growing jobs in America. So it's obviously really exciting. For wind in particular, I think one trend that we've seen is that it's been really good for rural America. It's probably pretty obvious, but we build the majority of these projects in rural counties, big open spaces in the middle of the country. In particular, that area from Texas up to the Dakotas is what we call the wind belt of the country, where there's a lot of resource blowing across the plains and a lot of open space to build. And so when we talk about these jobs and the private investment and all of economic development that goes into building a wind farm, we're really talking about rural America where we're putting these projects. It's Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. That's where the bulk of the jobs are in wind. And then one other trend I wanted to point to at the outset here is the strong relationship between wind jobs and veterans. So we hire veterans at a rate 72% higher than the average U.S. industry. So we have a lot of veterans in the wind workforce. And it's something we're obviously really proud of, but we do it for really practical reasons. So when servicemen and women get out of the military, they often have very specific skills around computers or mechanical skills that are directly transferable to the wind industry. And in addition to that, we hear from our companies that they're sending their employees out to these really remote locations, oftentimes in difficult, harsh environmental conditions where you might be in a really confined space or you might be up really high on top of a turbine. And these veterans have that integrity and that sense of mission and independence that they can kind of go out to these remote locations and get the job done without a lot of oversight. And so we see across the board our companies hiring veterans at a really high rate. So with that, again, it's great to be here this morning, Lisa, and look forward to the conversation.
I want to come back to that topic of recruitment and in particular how we support our veterans. So hold that thought. Mm-hmm. Brian, let's go to you, please.
Thank you, Lisa. As mentioned, I'm Brian Just. I'm with the American Petroleum Institute here in town. The American Petroleum Institute is a national trade association that represents all facets of the oil and natural gas industry. Our members include large integrated companies, as well as companies involved in individual sectors of exploration, production, pipelines, mining, refining, ocean, marine, and service sector jobs. API is really interested in this topic about employment and the economic impacts in the economy, and both in terms of the current workforce as well as what is going to be needed for the workforce of the future. And so we're really excited to be here, and it's a great way to kick off the session this morning. As mentioned, natural gas has made great gains in the last few years, becoming a largest source of dispatchable electricity generation. And using natural gas, modern production and exploration techniques improves its environmental footprint, and natural gas is produced more cleanly with these modern technologies. And over the last number of years, the fuel switching to natural gas has really been credited with about a 60% of the CO2 emission reductions from power generation. Going further into the jobs impact, there's three areas I'd like to focus on or highlight. One is the millennials. As we look to the future of the workforce, our industry will rely and will need to its ability to draw younger workers into the workforce. Another one is in the area of STEM, which is the science, technology, engineering, and mathematical education and training. We see STEM as a pathway to improve job outcomes. And interestingly, not only with traditional bachelor's degrees, but also with certification and training, along with a high school diploma, also improves employment outcomes. And then finally, we see areas with minorities and women in the workforce. We see lots of places for advancement and improvement with those. We had a study that looked at the future of development of energy out to the year 2035, and under a policy scenario with pro-development, it increased the number of job opportunities by 1.9 million direct jobs out to the year 2035. So I think there's some examples there where, with the right policies in place, it will help improve job outcomes.
Thank you. Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Duncan. I'm with National Grid. I'm a director of federal affairs there, so I'm one of our federal lobbyists in our DC office. National Grid is a global energy company, so we have a UK parent based in, headquartered in London, and then here in the United States, we serve about 20 million people in Massachusetts, New York, and Rhode Island. So we own the natural gas and electric distribution and electric transmission grid in parts of those states and the Commonwealth there. And we employ about 15,000 people. The vast majority of those are labor, union workers who do a great job for us, and then we have a management team as well. And I think kind of the two things I'd like to focus on today are two kind of gaps or issues that National Grid is really focused on, and I think are pretty prevalent in the utility industry as well. And the first is the age gap. So the average age of a National Grid worker is 44 years old. So a little bit older than me, I'm happy to say. But we expect about 30% of our workforce to retire in the next 10 years. Luckily for us, we have, kind of to your point, Brian, the ratio of our millennial employees is growing pretty rapidly. And so about a third of our workforce by 2023, we expect to be millennials, or from that kind of generation. So we are replacing those workers, but because of the age and the tenure of those folks who are retiring, we're also having a bit of a skills gap, right? And so finding those workers who have the skills we need, not only for the current jobs that we have, but also for kind of the skills of the future, if you will. So we really see technology at the forefront of the skill requirements of the future of our workforce. The penetration of distributed energy resources on our system it's going to change how our networks are constructed and maintained and operated. We see greater amounts of automation, smart devices, smart metering. All of that's going to require a different skill set and a workforce that can keep up with that technological change. Our engineering workforce, big bulk of our workers are engineers, are going to have to evolve to leverage a greater amount of data and automation, and that's going to kind of replace a lot of the labor-intensive work that we've seen in the past. And so we're really anticipating growth in the areas of automation, business intelligence, AI, cloud-based analytics, customer support and services, and what our customers are asking of us, right? I mean, they are now using smart meters. They now want to have energy storage in their homes, distributed generation, whether it's solar on their roof or in their yard. And so the interaction with our customers is changing, which means our workforce needs to change along with it. And again, kind of to your point, Brian, I think this is a theme perhaps, but 70% of all of our new headcount growth is in the STEM fields. And so that's a big focus for us as well, is retaining these millennials, training them, and making sure in what is a very competitive environment for STEM jobs that we're finding the right people to serve this workforce of the future. So I think I'll leave it there, Lisa, and look forward to the discussion.
I have a long list of questions, but we have plenty of time. So I think we could probably talk through most of them. But before I go to my questions, just a reminder, we would love to have your questions. So I believe there are index cards, or if there's not, yes, there might be on the table. So please write down your question, and then when we get to about 10 minutes before close, we will respond to some of them. So I think when we talk about jobs, sometimes we just get lost in the figures and the numbers. But a project that I'm proud to say a partner organization and a steering committee member of National Clean Energy Week, the Clean Energy Business Network did, called Faces of the Facts, or Faces of the Facts about Clean Energy Industries, really profiles what it's like to be a clean energy worker, and they do it in a very diverse way. And some of those materials are available here in hard copy, but all of it's available electronically. So I'm just going to hold this up because you'll see it as you walk in. This is their portfolio of a few of the featured clean energy workers that they're promoting as part of Clean Energy Week. So I encourage you to pick it up and take a look at it. And it's just very inspiring. And again, very diverse industries, different parts of the country. And again, reviewing their story shows you what an impact we're making on the U.S. economy. And so it just gives another added piece to this story. And then I'd also say that the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, I was doing what I said sometimes isn't always as good, as like giving you lots of data and giving you facts. But one of the things that the council does is tracks progress in U.S. energy industries every year with a report that we commissioned from Bloomberg New Energy Finance called the Sustainable Energy in America Fact Book. And there are some of the high point statistics from our recent release earlier this year that are available here. And again, all of this information, the faces behind the facts and information on U.S. clean energy industries are all available in digital form, online, on standalone websites with lots of cool tools, videos, and other ways that you can access this information and hopefully share it with others. So I encourage you to look at those resources, and they will be a good complement to the jobs report that Bob highlighted, which we also include that data in our fact book because we just think it's really important to drill down and track the progress we're making over time in jobs. So, Bob, I'm going to go to you first, actually, because you talked about energy efficiency. People raised their hand, and yes, that was the predominant number of hands raised. So what did you find as it relates to energy efficiency jobs in the report this year?
Great. Well, I think when a lot of people think of clean energy, they naturally think of solar panel installers or wind turbine technicians and that sort of thing, and that's natural, right? Energy efficiency is just a huge sector that covers so many areas. A lot of those jobs, those 2.25 million jobs, are construction jobs. They're jobs with folks that are making these office buildings downtown better and smarter, putting in better windows, putting in better insulation, replacing old HVAC systems with new high-efficiency systems, replacing big energy-sucking light bulbs like those with more efficient LEDs and things like that. That's one part of the energy efficiency business. Another part is manufacturing, and that's manufacturing all those parts, all those controls, et cetera, that go into those buildings. It's also manufacturing Energy Star appliances and other equipment like that. And then I'll give you, and then there are other parts of energy efficiency as well, of course. I'll give you a couple examples. I think it's always easier to envision this when you can picture somebody. But I'll give you three examples. One is a guy named Greg Smith. Greg is an E2 member in Tip City, Ohio. Greg runs a company called Energy Optimizers, which basically has, Lisa, he has contracts with all of the school districts in Ohio to increase the energy efficiency in those school systems. So Greg will go out and he'll walk through a building, and he's got maybe 100 employees or something like that, and his folks will walk through these buildings. They'll figure out how the HVAC systems are leaking and the lights are bad and the windows are drafty in the winter, that sort of thing. And then they go out and they hire dozens, sometimes hundreds of contractors to do all that work. That's energy efficiency. That's what energy efficiency looks like. Another example would be Kevin Morse. Kevin is a member of ours from Colorado. He was here yesterday and had to leave this morning, unfortunately, to go to Ohio, of all places. But Kevin is in the CPACE finance business. So CPACE, commercial PACE, is essentially financing energy efficiency improvements to building through the tax code, essentially. I think that's the easiest way to explain it. But Kevin has a fund of, I think it's 500 million now, and he goes around and helps building owners finance energy improvements. He doesn't go out there and swing a hammer himself, but he hires the people, and the building owners hire the people that are going to improve those building envelopes, that are going to make the HVAC, the lighting, the controls better. Last example is back in the back is the CEO of Boss Controls from Pittsburgh, who was down with us yesterday and today as well. Boss has a turnkey solution to making buildings better, and they have everything from the controls to managing the software behind that to make rooms more efficient and buildings more efficient all over the place. About 100 employees there, but they also hire a lot of contractors all over the place. So,
yeah, amazing. And you mentioned CPACE or commercial pace, which is a policy, right? So I want to go to Brian. You at the very close of your remarks, you made a comment about policy. You said, with the right policy, we can expand job opportunities. And maybe other people want to comment on the panel on this question too. But that's one example: commercial pace and an appropriate policy that is driving investment and creating jobs, depending on how it's executed and implemented. But what's your thought on the role of policy and job creation in clean energy sectors?
Sure, thank you. The role of policy is very important. It is, it sets the tone and the environment for what businesses and industry can do, or how fast they can do it. And I think it's very important that having a stable policy and a stable policy that also promotes growth and development is very important. And we can see in the oil and gas industry, especially in the case where we need more pipelines to transport the natural gas from places where it's being produced to places where it's being consumed, to the extent that policies are pro-development, they really do make a difference. They really do help. I mentioned a study. We compared a base case that was kind of a business as usual constrained case with a pro-development case, which would allow for pipeline expansion, access to export markets and trade. And we saw, like I said, 1.9 million direct job opportunities over the years to 2035. So it does make a huge difference in freeing up the industries to do the things they do, to build the infrastructure, to produce the energy, and send it to consumers where it can be used and consumed at affordable prices.
Thank you. I'd like to see if Maggie or Emily want to comment on that too, because you might have your own examples of policies that have either helped or hindered job creation. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll add to that. So for wind energy, it's very much been about the production tax credit, which has been the primary incentive in the tax code to help wind develop over the last several years. And for a long time, that tax credit had to be renewed on almost an annual basis. And so we saw this sort of start-stop in the industry, not only in terms of the number of megawatts that were being installed each year, but in terms of the jobs, because our developers weren't able to make long-term investment decisions because they didn't have that clarity about whether the tax credit would be going away that year or not. And so they would hold off making decisions. And so it was a really difficult business environment to operate in. Back in 2016, not that long ago, there was a 5-year extension of the production tax credit. And in fact, it's a phase out of the credit. So it's stepping down over 5 years. I think we're in the 4th year of those 5 years now. And even though it's a phase out, it's happening in an orderly, predictable way. And so our companies have been able to manage that much better than this start-stop policy. And so having that policy certainty has enabled them to make longer-term investments, to make hiring decisions and expansions of factories and whatnot, in a way that's going to make, when the PTC does go away, make it livable, make it doable, and continue to have clean, affordable wind energy without the policy in place. But we needed that predictability and that policy stability in order to get to the place that we're in now.
Yeah, I think obviously I want to turn to Emily and then Bob wants to say something, but this concept of predictability and having a pathway for investment that meets your business cycle, I think sometimes outsiders that are not as familiar with the energy industry, assume it has special characteristics versus other industries. I mean, all industries share the need for kind of a predictable investment climate. And when it's there, it can be very powerful. So Emily, did you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I've got kind of two examples I can give you. The Northeast is still kind of one of the few parts of the country where a lot of people are still using heating oil, home heating oil, to heat their homes. And a lot of them want to, convert to natural gas. So we've been doing a lot of natural gas conversions, thousands of natural gas conversions over the past few years. But last year was actually the first year that we interconnected more DG systems than we did natural gas conversions, which is pretty remarkable for us. And so what we're finding is that...
Can I just stop you? What do you mean by DG?
I'm sorry, solar, so distributed generation.
Okay.
So we were interconnecting more home solar systems than we were oil to gas conversions, which is pretty remarkable, given where we are in the country. And so just to deal with those interconnections over the past few years, we've had to hire over 100 workers simply to work on our interconnection queues and getting that solar interconnected in a faster way. So having those policies in place at the state and federal level that encouraged the uptake of solar, drove down the prices, that resulted in a different workforce for us and different skill set for those workers that we have. And then the second example I'll give you is smart meters, right? We've been rolling out smart meters, doing smart meter pilots in Massachusetts and in some of our other cities and towns. For all of us who have electric meters, we used to have somebody would come to your house and read your meter, report back, and that would tell you what your bill is. And then a few years after that, people see cars driving by and utility trucks, and they could read your meter from the road. Well, now with smart meters, there's no need to send anybody out, right? That's a two-way communication system with our network, so we know exactly how much power you're using. And so we no longer need those folks coming to your house all the time. So we've had to rejigger what they do and what their role is in the company and how they work with the network. So that's just kind of two examples of how, policies that have driven, whether it's solar distributed generation or smarter networks, smarter grid, and smart meters, have changed our workforce.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Bob.
Yeah, thank you for that. Policies matter. Policies matter at the federal level with policies like the ITC and the PTC. They also matter at the state level. Look around the country right now. For years, the biggest wind state in this country was Iowa. Why is that? Because they have a lot of wind there. But you know what else? They were also the first state to pass a renewable portfolio standard. Passed, by the way, by the longest-serving Republican governor in this country, Terry Branstad. The number 2 solar state in this country, unless you're in the solar business, you might not know this. It's North Carolina. North Carolina, the sun doesn't shine, because I'm from there, the sun doesn't shine any brighter in North Carolina than it does in Virginia or South Carolina. But it's the number 2 or number 3 solar state in the country. Why is that? North Carolina's got the only renewable portfolio standard in the Southeast. So state policies matter. And look at on energy efficiency. One of the biggest states for energy efficiency jobs in this country is Massachusetts. Massachusetts also has some of the best state energy efficiency policies in the country. So policies matter at the federal level. They also matter at the state level.
Great. Well, that was an excellent discussion. So we've got a few more minutes before we're going to go to questions, but I wanted to talk about 2 topics, and one related, I think, is a good follow-up to what you just said about how you're recruiting for the workforce you need now and the workforce you need in the future. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about veterans and how you're connected and how you're recruiting to support our veterans, because I think those are really important topics. I guess the last one I'd ask is diversity, and I think we can probably combine that over both, because we need to expand, Brian, as you said, the opportunities broadly in the economy, and we want to have a diverse and vibrant workforce, and so we need to be thinking about all those things. So I don't know who wants to hop in first on those 3 areas. One was, how do we recruit? You talked a little bit in our planning call, Emily, about some of the pipeline project and how you reach out. So maybe you can start there, and then others can hop in covering whatever topics they'd like.
Sure, no problem. So I think as a few of us mentioned, STEM is really a huge area of growth for us, and it's a very competitive job area, right? We're always trying to find more folks in the STEM arena. to hire. And so as part of that kind of workforce development, National Grid has established 3 pipeline programs. One is a graduate development program, one is a summer internship program, and then one is solely focused on engineering. And we receive applications, thousands of applications every year, and push people in through these pipeline programs. They're typically about 18 months, and they do rotations throughout the company or various departments, so whether it's IS or engineering or customer services or the environmental department, procurement, finance, you name it. And then at the end of that 18-month rotation, we hire a certain portion of those folks from that program. And we've been doing this now for the past 8 years or so, and we've been looking at our retention rates. And the people who have gone through those programs have a really high retention rate. We've managed to keep 80 to 90% of those folks who have gone through our pipeline program. So that's been really successful for us. I would say in addition to that, we attend a lot of career fairs. Our HR department goes to about 70 different fairs every year, some focused on veterans, some focused on diversity, a lot of college and university fairs and national conferences. And then the other thing we do is we're very active in our communities, right? All of our employees work and live in the communities in which they are. And so we support tens of student programs in the STEM area, Boy Scouts of America, United Way programs, all kinds of community programs in our communities that are helping, kind of create those STEM interests and those STEM students that we hope will be part of our workforce in the future. And we do the same with community colleges. We've created certificate programs for gas and electric technicians and metering, customer metering services. But I think the last one I want to focus on really quickly, one kind of last example, I think as we all know, Hurricane Maria was very devastating for Puerto Rico, and part of what the utility industry is really known for is mutual assistance. And so almost every utility in the country sent workers down to Puerto Rico. National Grid sent about 200 workers down to Puerto Rico to help the Puerto Ricans kind of get back online and get electricity back running through their homes. So as part of that program and part of that effort, we actually hosted 6 juniors from a high school down in Puerto Rico, University Gardens. We brought them up to New York, to our headquarters in Brooklyn, for several weeks, and we provided mentoring to them. We had them be part of kind of a rotational program, and the hope is that those juniors will return when they graduate from high school and be part of our summer internship program and eventually make their way through our engineering program or other grad program or pipeline program. So those are some of the ways that we're trying to attract and retain students and a future workforce.
Thank you. Let me see if others want to offer some experiences that they see in their industry. Yeah,
I'll just jump in on with the veterans. I know
Sure.
I mentioned earlier in the panel, but the oil and gas industry is really committed to helping veterans as they leave the military service and want to re-enter the civilian workforce. We've looked at this. We've developed a website. It's a Veterans Energy Pipeline, and the idea is to match up occupations of the military members with jobs and occupations within the oil and gas industry, and it helps both from the veteran perspective in finding how their skill set may apply to jobs in the oil and gas industry. And it also helps with the oil and gas industry and the company's HR folks and recruiters to see, help match up the openings they have with which skills may line up, which types of military occupations would line up with the jobs they're trying to fill. It looks like there's maybe, we see around a million or so veterans entering the workforce or leaving the military in the next few years. So it's we are committed to helping that group enter the workforce.
Thank you. Maggie, do you have any comments?
I'll just build on that a little bit. That's actually a great idea that you guys have that website. Some of our companies have their own specific veteran recruitment programs that they do. As industry-wide, we don't have a program like that, but obviously it's a fantastic idea. There's actually a bill introduced this year in the Senate, bipartisan bill from Senator Duckworth of Illinois and Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, called the Clean Energy Energy Ready Vets Program, and it would be a program that would help recruit veterans into clean energy jobs. So whether it be in renewable energy, energy efficiency, nuclear energy, I think it was a pretty broad range of jobs, but just trying to get sort of those credentials in place. And it provides a 6-month internship program for vets so that they can more easily be placed into jobs in the clean energy sector. And it also gives some credentialing to companies that are willing to, to hire the vets that have kind of the pipeline set up for them to go into. So we're really supportive of trying to find more programs like this that are going to be helpful to bring veterans into the workforce, because obviously they're a really valuable employee.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Did you have any comments?
Well, I'll just mention that I think Maggie mentioned about 11% of wind industry workers are veterans right now. Mm-hmm. That's pretty similar with the rest of the clean energy industry as well, and solar, and also in energy efficiency. And that compares to about 6%, by the way, of veterans in the overall national workforce. And here's one of the reasons why. Think about this for a minute. The military is the biggest user of energy. Our military is the biggest user of energy in this world. The military also is leading on clean energy like no other agency, department, et cetera, in our country. Whether it's putting renewables on bases and in forward operating bases, whether it's pioneering biofuels and clean fuels in ships and in airplanes, or whether it's preserving energy and pioneering the use of batteries and storage. So the folks that are getting out of the military are already trained up on this stuff. And by the way, it doesn't hurt that they're not afraid of climbing a couple hundred feet up into a wind turbine in the middle of Colorado or somewhere else. So.
Okay, well, we have about 1 minute, so I'm going to turn the tables over to all of you. So I think if people have cards, we have a few already. So here, let me look at a couple. I guess, before I look at these, my reaction to what you've just described, some really exciting initiatives, and also, a little bit of best practice sharing. Maybe that's something other industries can benefit to see what the oil and gas industry is doing on its veterans program, and either through supportive legislation or other capacity from other places, or just do it on its own. So thanks for sharing that, and we may find that others follow that leadership. But do you feel that these initiatives are keeping pace with the need? Or is there, we've found the right pipelines, we just need to accelerate and watch them bear the fruit? Or no, we're still kind of really concerned that we won't be able to meet the demand?
I think we always have to be evolving, right?
Yeah.
I think we're trying to keep pace with it, and I think we're doing a good job, and certainly these pipelines are helping us, but I think we're always going to have to continue to evolve to keep up with the pace of change.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's evolving, especially in the area of STEM. Mm-hmm. I think that's some of the fastest growing, where the fastest growing job demand will be in the coming years, and it's a large number of degrees and education and training, but it's really important that we stay on top of that and encourage that kind of training and education in STEM.
Well, so one of the questions that I have on the top here, it relates to that, and it was about the connection between our education systems. Is there more investment or more enhancement in the STEM programs that's needed, or do you feel that you have the support? And that may be going very deeper dive into the education aspect of this, but the question was, is our education system keeping up with the emphasis that you need on STEM from your standpoint?
Go ahead.
I don't know, that's hard for me to say. I don't know, probably not, I don't know. Given that we are so interested in it and how much we're investing in programs in the community that are actually outside of even the school system, I think there is a lot happening in the private sector and in the nonprofit sector to kind of to add on to what is happening in our school system. So I think our school systems are obviously working very hard to create students who are interested in STEM and who can join the workforce in those types of careers. But the fact that there are so many other programs outside of the school system says to me that there's a lot of work in this area, and we all kind of have to work together to make it happen.
Some of us may have school-age kids, but I can just see from my own personal point of view, the emphasis is increasing, certainly in the last decade that I've watched my children go through the school system. and it complements the changes in technology. But I think hearing from the private sector that this is important, and then you proactively engaging in your community is probably a really important enhancement. So maybe this panel is adding to that, just putting a flag there. This is really important, and please, everybody has a role to play in making that clear.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I have a 4-year-old in daycare, and they have a STEM room at daycare.
Really?
So yeah, I guess the message is getting through.
All right, well, we had 2 other questions, and we have a few minutes left, and I probably have time maybe for 1 or 2 more, depending on how long we go on these. These are good. I'm going to do this. Maybe Bob and Brian can talk a little bit about this. The question related to, how does certain clean energy sector job numbers track with other segments of the energy industry? I don't know, maybe it would be a better place to start to just maybe, Bob, you talked about energy efficiency jobs compared to other sectors. Do you want to talk generally about kind of the breakouts of jobs in different segments of the industry? And then if others want to chime in on that, they can. I mean, if you don't know all those off the top of your head, don't feel like you put on the spot. I know a few. Probably if we go down the line, we would all be able to chime in on.
You want to start?
Well, I mean, you said, we always say over 3 million are supported by clean energy. And for our, the Business Council, we're looking mostly at energy efficiency, natural gas, and renewable energy jobs.
Right.
And you already mentioned that it's about 500,000 in solar, 2.2 in the last report for energy efficiency broadly. I don't know, Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about the oil and gas industry?
Yeah, we talk about 10.3 million jobs being supported by the oil and gas industry. That's direct, induced, indirect, all across the supply chain. I'm not sure who asked the question from the audience, but if you want to speak to me afterwards, I can give you some more specific numbers on how that may break down across the direct, induced, indirect. I'm happy to do that. I'll stick around for a few minutes.
That's great. And also the report itself is very comprehensive, and it covers all segments of the energy industry. So your most recent report is on the website, yes?
Right.
Do you want to let people know what website it's on?
Absolutely. Well, you can find any of the numbers that we have at e2.org/reports. We've got our Clean Energy Jobs America report up there, Energy Efficiency Jobs in America. We just released something yesterday, the top 50 metros for clean energy jobs. And one thing I wanted to mention, Lisa, on all of this, both when you're looking at the state level, city level, et cetera. By the way, we've got all this stuff down to the city, the county, the congressional, the legislative district level now for every single legislative district in this country. So in our advocacy work, you can imagine how that's kind of sort of helpful. But one of the things I wanted to mention is when you look across this sector, the cool thing about clean energy is that it's in every single state, red, blue, purple, pink, whatever. Yes, California's at the top and New York's up there too, but you know what? As I mentioned, so is North Carolina, so is Iowa, so is Florida, so is Texas, of course. And when you look at the cities, also at the top of the list is LA and New York because they're the biggest and because they're very progressive on clean energy policies. But you also have places like St. Louis in there, DC, Baltimore, Houston, those types of places. So the point is clean energy knows no partisan bounds, if you will. And it's I think the theme of this whole conference is that clean energy isn't limited to shale fields in North Dakota or drilling in the Gulf of Mexico or anything like that. It's all across the country, and there are jobs available to people of all skills levels.
Yes, that's true. So we have 3.5 minutes left, and we have a meaty question to close on, so we don't have to go into a lot of detail, but I think it's important, and I may broaden it a little bit, but it says, what do we believe, the panelists believe, an impact of a policy like a carbon tax would have on job creation? So it doesn't have to just be the carbon tax, but we can maybe reiterate some of the points we made on the value of policy stability. But does anyone want to comment? I mean, I would just say from the Business Council side, we're looking at all policies. We're very interested in market-based, economy-wide, technology-neutral policies that value the attributes of energy resources, and environmental attributes are extremely important. whether it be air quality or climate change or water use. I mean, we could go down the list. So for us, we would think if we had an appropriate policy in that arena, that it would be positive for job creation. So I could start it off. Other people want to comment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to avoid the question. National Grid doesn't own generation for the most part. We have a few gas peaker plants, and we own some solar, but because we're in a deregulated market, we're not generally allowed to own generation. So I think a carbon tax would affect and impact our job force potentially differently than it would other utilities in the country. But I will say that National Grid is looking really closely at a carbon tax internally and not ready to make any public statements yet, but I think it's something that we're very focused on and interested in seeing how it progresses.
Yeah, and certainly from the wind perspective, as a zero carbon emitting technology, I think that our member companies are really interested in exploring the idea of putting a price on carbon. I think it would obviously be really beneficial to the technology, to the business that we're in. So I think, to Emily's point, it's who knows how we do that and when that happens, but it's definitely something that our industry is interested in looking at further.
Any other comments?
I don't have too many comments other than, it's, I think I'd probably echo your comments on that.
Well, I also stole a little bit from Andy Karsner, though we wholeheartedly agree, looking at, market-based technology neutral policies that value assets and attributes that consumers and businesses need when it comes to the energy sector. So,
I would add that market-based solutions is really important.
But this connection with predictable policy at all levels and jobs and investment is very strong, and we heard that. So, Bob, did you have any concluding comments?
Well, I was just going to say, it seems like here in Washington, a carbon tax is kind of the holy grail. Everybody's talking about it here. The fact of the matter is, this is kind of sort of already happening in a lot of states. Obviously, California's got a cap and trade program. It looks like Oregon is going to come close to doing something like that. We have something similar, obviously not a carbon tax program, but something similar in the RGGI states in the Northeast. Sure, those policies matter, but you know what? There's a lot of other policies that are probably less controversial that could happen in this town that could do a lot to spur industry in this, or spur jobs in this industry. I'm thinking about continuing to invest in ARPA-E and in our national labs to get some of these technologies around batteries and storage, for instance, more into the mainstream. Battery and storage employment, by the way, grew by 12% last year. It was one of the biggest categories of growth. And we know that's only going to go up as we see more of that. But there are other things that can be done besides a carbon tax on a national level. And part of the problem is that the devil's in the details on how you roll something like that out and still protect our environment while growing these jobs in the economy.
Well, that was very well said.
Well, I don't know about that.
We are going to conclude, and I think you've just launched, a good opportunity to continue the discussion on policy with other panels today. So well done, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody here.
Thank you.